Well, please reconnect with an old friend. He is the legal analyst for Forbes and TSN, Mr. Eric Macramalla, back with Sekeres and Price. How you doing, Eric?
My man, I'm doing great. Got a haircut, trim the sideburns for this segment, so I'm very excited.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Look at you. Listen, obviously, we wanted to tap into your mind on your interpretation and what you see as the path forward here with the Vancouver Canucks. Their chairman, owner, Francesco Aquilini, has been accused by his children in court of abuse, allegations that he denies. The NHL says it is monitoring the matter. What's the next step here, Eric, if there is a next step here?
Insofar as the NHL goes, right? Whatever the next step is for them. So I know in sports today, we often, when we hear something bad about an owner, we immediately think, okay, will that owner be asked politely or told or forced to sell the team? And I think in this circumstance here, there's not enough at all for the forced disposition or sale of this franchise. So you're looking at allegations. They're troubling allegations. I'm a dad, and I read that. I'm like, this doesn't really feel right to me. But even if some of the allegations are true, I don't know from a legal standpoint where there's enough there to force the sale of a team. Typically, what happens in sports is that from a legal standpoint, you need to do something really, really bad to be forced to sell a team, right? So courts and judges don't look fondly on forcing someone to sell his business. But it's not really a legal matter, is it? It's really more than that. It's more of an issue as to how the public reacts to the allegations and how the public may react to whatever findings are made. And if there's enough pressure from stakeholders, from business partners, from fans to have him removed, then that ultimately becomes a litmus test, right? Because that's what you saw with Sarver, who still owns the Phoenix Suns and the WNBA team as well. I think it's the Mercury. And he initially said no to selling the team, was fined, was it $10 million and suspended for a year. But then there was so much pressure. The players mobilized, stakeholders mobilized like PayPal, and they forced him out. That in part was for using the N-word 5 times. Although if you read the law firm's report, he never used it in a way to demean other people. It was just him doing the old white man thing, using the N-word, and it's silly and stupid.
Oh yeah, that old thing. Yes.
Yeah, but I think when you use that word, I think there's such a lack of judgment and common sense that probably deserve to be banned just for that, to be honest with you. But you have to look at each case individually, and then you assess it from a legal standpoint. So probably not enough there with allegations. If it goes beyond allegations, they're proven to be true. Although these are civil lawsuits, right? They're not criminal allegations, which is different. Then the next assessment really is, are there enough people mobilizing to get rid of someone? Because these teams are effectively public businesses. The owners are effectively, there's this kind of, they're holding this team in a way in trust, for the fans. And if there's anything negative, then the league may look to have the team moved, but to a different owner. But for now, I just don't see it.
If those 4 children go to the police, say, with those allegations, there's likely an investigation, right? That they swore affidavits and submitted them as supporting evidence in a civil matter. Is there anything, like in your experience, or the police, is anybody compelled to go investigate that, or can they just die on the vine there in this civil matter?
If it's a circumstance where the kids are alleging they were physically abused by their dad, they have to be, number one, within the statute of limitations. Now, assuming that they are, and they may well be, I don't know. The prosecutors understand they need the cooperation of the children if they are to bring forward tenable legal claims, criminal claims against the owner. Because without the testimony and cooperation of the kids, you have no case. So effectively, they have to work together. That hasn't happened, and that's a really big step. And my understanding is the allegations of abuse were raised within the context of ongoing litigation when it comes to custody. Is that right?
Yeah. Well,
less custody, more financial support.
Exactly.
That's what I meant. Sorry, like just custody generally, all the terms, conditions that come with custody. So it's not the kids suing the dad for assault and battery. It's those were revealed with respect to determining issues of financial payment. So, because the kids are pretty much grown up at this point, right? So,
yes, yep.
I don't foresee a circumstance, and the kids would move to have criminal charges pressed against their dad. That that I would be really surprised by that. So that sounds like, an issue they're trying to deal with on their own, but doing so unsuccessfully. So he's denied it. This is a claim that the claim advance is not that he abused them. That's just within the four corners of a claim about custody and financial payments and those things and support. So there's not much the NHL can do here.
What's his side going to do, Eric? What's the Aquilini legal side going to do to mitigate all this? Because they know that that's out there, but because it's not being tried, they also can't prove their innocence. What do they do with this hanging out there? Do you think? They're just hoping.
It's such a good point. It's such a good point because, again, this is not a civil lawsuit that is alleging he beat them. That's not what it is. So if you're his lawyers, you're telling him we have a two-pronged approach. Number one, a public statement, which he has made. And then number two, within the four corners lawsuit, because it's been raised, you still have a right to address it, right? Because it's been raised, there's a reason in part to increase whatever financial payment is made, but also to apply pressure. That's the big reason it's been advanced in this claim, is to apply pressure on him to kind of just, agree to whatever terms being proposed. So he needs to fight that, and he has every right to, because it's been raised within the four corners of the claim.
The world of sports has been lambasted by, just all sorts of scandals, really A to Z. And lately with hockey in the crosshairs with Hockey Canada, you wonder if Gary Bettman is taking notes. Do you have any faith that Gary Bettman is taking notes on the PR, hit that the sport is taking as a whole, and wanting to make sure these things are not swept under the rug by any stretch of the imagination, but actually dealt with, and the fact that he might get PR out of that? Do you think there's any faith to be had there in the NHL?
I think all commissioners are sensitive now to the impact that a single case can have on the business of their sport and can impact the reputation and goodwill of a league, and that they have to act swiftly. So in the Beach circumstance, the NHL was way too slow on that. Maybe could have handled it a little bit better, although I do kind of get what was happening with Daly and Bettman. I understand where they were coming from. And so, they would, argue, or they would contend what they did was appropriate. And there's an argument that it was. It's just maybe the optics weren't handled maybe as well as it should. But I think Gary Bettman, I think the question you're asking is, does he want to get ahead of this Hockey Canada investigation when they finally name names? Is that kind of what you're asking?
Well, just the fact that if I'm the NHL, I'm seeing what's happening with Hockey Canada, and I'm just going to make sure that I don't take the bullet, because they are being raked over the coals for their reaction. Do you want that on your resume again after the Blackhawks scenario as well? Like, it just becomes piling on, rightfully so, if you let this thing fester.
There are still some names of players that haven't yet been publicly identified as part of the more recent one. And then there's an earlier investigation as well that's been reopened by Hockey Canada. I think if you're the NHL, you want to distance yourself from Hockey Canada as best you can. And as a parent who's registered his kids in minor hockey, I want to distance myself from Hockey Canada, to be honest. I had no clue that my registration fees were being used to pay for uninsured liabilities, namely sexual assault claims. And I'm kind of pissed about it, if I'm being honest with you. I think it's kind of gross and disgusting. I wish I had just been told, because I do understand when you pay those fees, they go to cover insurance, but the insurance that I'm buying into covers the kids on the ice and not for stuff that happens in a hotel bedroom or room. As far as Gary Bettman goes, you want to try and get ahead of this, I think, as best you can, but it's a really delicate situation. You can't name names because then you can be sued for defamation. You got to let the whole process unfold. There's nothing much that Bettman and the NHL can do now. Maybe there's some workings behind the scenes, but I would expect that it's just wait and see, and then react as responsibly as you can whenever the news breaks.
Hockey Quebec has said it's going to withhold fees here. Eric, what could be what could ultimately be the upshot there if the provincial associations decide we don't want to do business with Hockey Canada and at least this executive anymore?
Well, I'm from Montreal, so I am one of the more popular exports of Quebec that is an educated bilingual Anglophone, if that makes any sense, because I do speak French and speak French relatively well. So when I saw that, I reacted in two ways. Number one is you wonder if other provincial associations will be doing the same thing. But I also understood, just given my background, that that decision may in part be political. So I guess we'll see how things unfold. But this is the ultimate issue here: is you've got leadership that wants to stay in place. I think it's not tenable. I think they need to step aside. I don't see there being a scenario long term where this works. Hockey Canada maybe doesn't need to be rebranded, but it needs new leadership. Hockey Canada's mandate is pretty clear. It's look out for the best interest of minor and youth hockey players across the country, and to set a standard, and that standard includes a moral and ethical standard. And they have failed, and they may tell you, look, we've done nothing wrong. We didn't engage in the sexual assaults. We are simply settling these lawsuits. And they'll say, we didn't tell you about the second slush fund because we haven't done anything wrong. Well, that's the issue, is transparency. You've got to be transparent. You've got to let people know what it is you're doing with their money, particularly if you're using the money to pay people off for unlawful criminal behavior. It doesn't work. It suggests a lack of judgment. And this dogmatic approach of wanting to stay in power is unfortunate. But it's not going to last. It can't, because you have too many people turning off the financial faucets. And eventually, when it goes dry, they will step aside.
As always, you've made us smarter, my friend. Thank you for this. And we'll catch up sooner rather than later. How about that?
Okay, I'll stay on the line and go to commercial. I'll come back and we'll do another segment. Is that soon enough? All right, guys. It was a really nice listening to you guys and chatting with you.
Great
Thanks,
to hear.
Eric.
Great to hear your voice again. Eric Macramalla, legal analyst for Forbes and TSN. So the way I read this, Blake, going forward, awful as this sounds, I think it's going to boil down to wins and losses.
In what sense?
Well, that winning is a great deodorant. And if the Vancouver Canucks are on the ice winning, I think people will be able to compartmentalize their feelings about Francesco, put it to the side, and just delight and rejoice in a hockey team that's winning for the first time in a decade. If the team is losing and sell the team chance start, then you wonder about whether or not fans and even sponsors want to stand by this. But we haven't seen any, we haven't heard of any exodus of sponsors yet. So I think it's going to be, as you said at the outset of this, the court of public opinion, and really, fans. Whether or not fans are willing to support a losing Vancouver Canucks team with an owner whose children has accused him of abuse. Allegations he's denied.
Yeah, the problem for a lot of fans is that it's uncomfortable to hear, and so they don't want to hear it anymore. Mm-hmm. So they want it to go away, and so they willfully sort of let it go away.
And there's absolutely, and
there's those on the other hand, they're saying, don't let this off the hook. We want new ownership too. Yeah. So there's fans in both camps.
No, I think you absolutely have some fans who have gone ostrich on it, and I think you've got some fans, and we will never hear from them, or very rarely hear from them, who have sworn off this team and sworn off this ownership group and won't support it anymore.